And so from there, I discovered investing out of state, and I discovered that I could get good properties in good areas for not a lot of money. Like you're talking 10% of what it would cost to buy something out here, at least now. So
Exactly.
that was the primary motivation for me. Just knowing that, this is where I am. It is what it is, but I want to get
Yeah.
started investing. And,
Yeah.
you know, if I was trying to still invest here, I would probably still be waiting and saving money. So,
Yeah,
you
and
know,
and that's a good thing because I think a lot of people they're always like, oh, when I, and so you have these years passing by, appreciation is happening in other markets, right, or cash flow is happening, and so there's a loss of opportunity, right? There's that opportunity cost that people don't factor in, and so. Welcome back to another episode of Lessons into Blessings podcast. I'm your host, Tari Thomas, and today we have the creator, founder of the Black Real Estate Dialogue podcast on the show with us. Sam Dolcine is here with us and talking just more about his journey, why he started the Black Real Estate Dialogue. I'm so excited for this. He's been able to grow his base of people who listen to him and have been able to take away so that they can start on their journey to generational wealth and financial freedom. So I'm going to help join to the show with me, Sam Dolcine.
thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Did I get the last name right?
You got it perfect.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Well, I'm glad to have you. I know you are in the state of California. How is it out there been for real estate? Just kind of jumping in, like, you've been in the state for how many years now?
I've been here for 8 years now, and I'm not involved in real estate out here, and I don't intend to be. It's too expensive. It's too many regulations. It's not for me.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I think that's so important because, like I live in the state of Arizona, and it's funny enough, this has been like really a great state for investing over the past, I'd say 15 to 20 years. And now, when COVID happened, it was an influx. I'd say 25% of imports from a people standpoint were from California. And so our market really inflated and it grew, crazy as a result of it because they could just put cash down. So tell me a little bit about why you're not investing in California and what started your journey down the real estate pathway.
Yes, definitely. So first, I would say it's too expensive, and second, it is way too tenant friendly, meaning that the laws cater to tenants, which is not a bad thing. Like I rent where I'm at now. It's cool, right? But as a landlord, just to me, on a smaller scale, especially, just doesn't make sense. And so I was trying to invest out here, and I quickly learned that I wouldn't qualify for much of anything because of my debt to income ratio and because of my income at the time. So this is like 5 years ago or so.
Yeah.
And so from there, I discovered investing out of state, and I discovered that I could get good properties in good areas for not a lot of money. Like you're talking 10% of what it would cost to buy something out here, at least now.
Exactly.
So that was the primary motivation for me. Just knowing that, this is where I am. It is what it is, but I want to get started investing. And, if I was trying to still invest here, I would probably still be waiting and saving money. So,
and that's a good thing because I think a lot of people, they're always like, oh, when I, and so you have these years passing by, appreciation is happening in other markets, right? Or cash flow is happening. And so there's a loss of opportunity, right? There's that opportunity cost that people don't factor in. And so it's good that you kind of said, you know what, if I continue to sit here, I'm going to be waiting for forever. I need to go pull the trigger, and I need to pull the trigger somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
What made
that's
you,
exactly
what was kind of your thoughts on just how you decided, okay, what places do I really want to jump in? What's going to even make sense for me?
Yes. When I got started, I had this long list of different cities. Most of them were throughout the Midwest and different parts of the South. And I was just doing a lot of research, trying to connect with people. And I ended up getting connected to some folks in Dayton, Ohio. and they sent me information about the market. I did my own research. So things like jobs, investment into infrastructure, and just things that are changing and growing in the city. And to me, it looked like a city that they are trying to have a comeback, if that makes sense. A lot of money's being poured into it, and the prices were good, the rents were good, and that's where I made my first contact. So I decided to investigate further and ended up buying there about 5 years ago. And so for me, I was just looking for a place with good rents and affordable prices, and then also a city that was heading in the right direction. And I found all those things in Dayton, and that's why I decided to get started there.
Now I'm going to take you back a little bit. So you found cities that were in the Midwest and the South. Why the Midwest and the South? Now, you talked about price point a little bit. You also talk about rents, because I'm sure you were doing some analysis to say, hey, based upon this purchase price and based upon what rent I can get for them, I need to be able to cash flow. What were some of your criteria? And we talk about buy boxes, right? So, maybe you can explain buy box for people, but how did you define your criteria or your buy box for what cities and markets you wanted to get into?
Yeah. So for me, I wanted to look into places that had, and I wanted to get started with single family homes. I wanted to look for places that had properties for $100,000 or less, which especially 5 years ago, dime a dozen, right? It's still many now, exactly, but even back then, that's before stuff started shooting up. So that was not hard to find. And then the second thing was, first thing was 100,000 or less. And then I didn't want to work with any contractors. I didn't want to do all that because I'm like states away. I didn't want to give myself any additional stress. So I wanted to buy a property that was more or less turnkey and ready to go. Yeah. So those were my main two criteria. And I wanted to cash flow at least $300 on the property. And that was essentially my criteria. Yeah. And, I didn't choose Dayton because of some crazy analysis that just happened to be where I met people who were trying to help me out. And then, the rest went from there. I'm sure I could have found similar fundamentals in many cities, but in many cities, I kind of just went with that. And the other thing too is it's a city that most people don't know or care about in Ohio on a national scale. So when you think about Ohio, for somebody who's not from there, you're probably thinking Cleveland, right? Yeah. Or maybe even Cincinnati, Columbus, because of Ohio State, or Cincinnati, right? But Dayton is not a place you think about. And Dayton is interestingly situated because it's pretty much in between Cincinnati and Columbus, about an hour-ish each way. So I thought that was something else that was interesting as well, because it's a place where there's not a lot of buzz, whereas of course there's like plenty of opportunities in Cleveland, right? But everybody is already thinking about Cleveland. Nobody was thinking about Dayton. I think now investors are catching on because I talk to my real estate agent sometimes, like they're getting more investor clients, and people understand like there's good opportunities there. So those are some of the reasons.
And so, I mean, what you're talking to a few great things, and you may have, I think some things we got to take the charge. So number one, I give you much credit for just taking the charge and say, hey, we got to pull the trigger somewhere. And there's a lot of things you learn. So some people, experts will say and guide you on, okay, you got to have all these things. You got to check all these boxes, but you did enough research to be dangerous. And then you took a leap of faith. So number one, kudos to you for that. Thanks. Second thing I hear you say is the market that you chose is kind of a tertiary market, right? So the indicators you had, okay, there's still growth going that way. There's still, and it's nestled in between good primary, secondary markets, where as these get popular and people start investing more in these, more jobs are coming in these, people are going to want to start flowing, it's going to drive momentum into some of those tertiary cities. And I always tell people, like, you can find a good market in every state, right? Like you got to know what you want, and you've got to be really particular, and you can find niche markets. And Dayton is, and I don't know much about Dayton. I do know Ohio is a good cash flow state, and there's certain areas that I'm even interested in, but Dayton's one of those good tertiary cities, secondary cities that are good, that are on the slow come up. And it's kudos that you found it at a good time right before kind of all that inflow started happening. And that you can't always time it, right? Like there's markets like that I've found in Phoenix. They're like kind of sub-markets of Phoenix, right? Streets and, neighborhoods. And I'm like, okay, yeah, directions going this way. I could see kind of the flow going in that direction. What gave you the confidence to say, hey, I mean, this is clearly across the country. What gave you the confidence just to invest in? What mindset do you think you needed to have, and what are the things that gave you the confidence to just pull the trigger on it?
Yeah, so one of the things that I thought about at the time was, what's the alternative? The alternative is I do nothing and just wait around and try to find opportunity in California that may never come.
Yeah.
And that was honestly my mentality. I didn't think there was necessarily a worst case scenario. And if something went wrong, it is what it is. Like, life goes on, you move on. So that was my mentality, is that, I felt comfortable enough. Obviously, everyone makes a lot of mistakes. You learn a whole lot, but you don't learn any of those things if you don't go forward. Like, I had no excuse or reason to not proceed once I found something that made enough sense. Yeah. So that was just my mentality. And it's unfortunate because I talk to people about this, and people get in their own way. People who have everything they need to go forward, they just get in their own way. But you have to get out of your own way. At the end of the day, no one said you're going to feel completely comfortable. No one said you're going to feel completely confident and not scared and have a little pit in your stomach. But it just is what it is. Like, I don't know how else to say it in a better way. You have to choose to either go forward and take the lessons and continue to grow, or you just stay stagnant and in the same position you were in 12 months from now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, and that's why I asked you what gives you the confidence to move forward, because I mean, I know a lot of people, that's the purpose of the show, right? Is helping get people off the fence of fear, understanding that there's going to always be, hiccups and bumps in the road of real estate. But if you're really nifty, you can be, tearing those lessons that you learn from real estate and make them into blessings. Right. And so I think just hearing you also identified kind of your risk threshold. If you're doing deals kind of under 100 or 100, you found states where you could play, it felt comfortable. You could put the right amount of down payment down, where it's like, okay, what's the worst that could happen? It's still asset backed, right? Type of if anything should happen, I have to sell it, or right. So I think from a risk threshold standpoint, that's good. But I also think there's probably something in your background, maybe just your parents' upbringing, how how they raised you, that also has to do with just your ability to be able to move forward, especially your first one, relatively young. I don't know if you were married at the time.
No, I wasn't.
Okay. So, it's taking, I think, for those people who are afraid, what would you tell them, some things they can do to help kind of get them over that hump?
So I would say, look at your life now, and in this particular area of real estate, like, what is it that you want real estate to do for you? Do you want that bad enough? Do you want that more than the alternative, which is just keeping things as they are now? And maybe you don't. And if you don't, then I guess you don't have enough motivation to cross over the finish line. But It's like, if you want something greater, you have to do something different. And during my experience, quite frankly, I didn't tell anybody about it until after I closed. I told pretty much nobody about it, because it's not to discredit anybody else, my friends, my family and stuff. But what I was doing was inconceivable. No one I knew had purchased a property in a place where they didn't know anybody, where they didn't have friends and family and all those things. That's conventional wisdom, right? And I understand it's not a bad thing that they thought that they thought that way, but I knew that ahead of time. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to stick to my guns, succeed, and then tell people about it, right? So I think people also get caught up in what other people say as well, because I'm telling you, I help people like do this whole process. And when I speak to prospective folks, it just really makes me sad, because sometimes, somebody might say, oh, well, my dad said that it's not a good time to invest in real estate, or my uncle. And it's like, well, are they real estate investors? Like, what is their experience based off of? Like, respectfully, right? But it's it doesn't make sense to take advice from people who haven't done what you want to do. So for example, if you want to learn how to make a 5-star meal, you're not going to call me because I'm not that great of a cook. It would it will make no sense because I'm not going to teach you that great because I don't cook that great, right? Yep. It's the same concept for any other part of life. If you have a medical ailment, you're going to go to a doctor. You're not going to go to a carpenter.
Exactly.
So by that same logic, why are you letting people who haven't done what you want to do to any degree, or maybe they did and they failed and fell flat on their face, unless they're telling you don't make the mistakes I made, they shouldn't be holding you back from something that you're convinced that you should be doing, you know? And a lot of people get caught up in listening to what other people have to say, who mean well, right? And getting in their own way and letting that fear overtake them. And the blunt reality is everyone has been there, but if you stay there, then
you're stuck.
Life is just going to pass you by, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the number one thing I heard you say is they need to understand their why, right? Understand why it is that you want to achieve what you want to achieve. Otherwise, you will stay in your own way and you will be stuck here. 10 years from now, you'll still be saying, hey, I want to take down this next property. I've been there. I've seen people, get stuck in that position. And so it's take a little bit of, do your research and then take somewhat of a leap of faith and understand your risk threshold, right? Like, you know what, I want to play in 100,000 or less markets. I want to play in 200,000. I want to put no more than X, Y, and Z % down. So really understanding that buy box and what you feel safe with. What I'd love to ask you is, because you talked about not knowing anyone in the state, I'm a believer of having the boots on the ground. You said that, there was people who responded back to you. Who did you find as your trusted boots on the ground, which kind of makes you feel a little bit stable, right? I think you would have the pit in your stomach if you didn't feel secure about who was in the state helping you do what you do. So who are your kind of boots on the ground? How did you establish those relationships? Can you talk a little bit to that?
Yes. So at the time, I had a property manager who I worked with at the time, no longer working with them, but that was part of my boots on the ground and helped me feel comfortable just knowing that certain things I didn't have to necessarily worry about. And then secondly, I met someone else she's like my boots on the ground to this day. Her name is Courtney. She helps me to this day. Right. And so she was someone else who was boots on the ground for me and actually helped me to notice a lot of things that the property manager was missing early on because she's in the city, she's investing in stuff. And, if I need her to look at something, it's an easy drive for her to check things out. So I would say those two factors made me feel a lot more comfortable with just investing out of state. And I'll say this too, like investing out of state is not for everybody, right? Some people just don't have the disposition and just can't make that disconnect from not being able to get to the property. And I get it. It's fine. Like if you want to invest where you are or hold out hope for wherever you are, you should be comfortable doing that, right? There's pros and cons to everything, but out-of-state investing is just simply not for everybody, right? Even if they can't afford where they are. Some people just don't have the mentality for it, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I think it's also important for people to know themselves and to, like you said earlier, know their risk tolerance, know what they're comfortable with, know what they're not comfortable with. And that's okay. Like I was talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago, he was ready. He wanted to invest out of state. And then he's like, you know what? I want to invest in Atlanta. I want to invest like where I am and stuff. And I wasn't surprised because in my conversation with him, there's just a lot of apprehension and like getting your own way as I'm talking to this person. Right. So, I hope it works out for him. But for some people, local is best. Figuring out a way somehow, whether you partner with people, whatever the case is. So that's what I'll say too, because it's just not for everybody.
Yeah. And I think you brought up another good point, which is really being able to, like, if you don't have that boots on the ground, number one, property management is key. I think your other person who is also a local investor to be able to do drive-bys, understand the market. I always want somebody in a market that I don't know that knows their market as good as I know my market, right? Like I know Phoenix like the back of my hand. I know submarkets. I know side streets. I know exactly, if you give me a property, give me the cross streets. I know exactly about that. So I think having that advisor, or however you want, a friend or whatever, to be able to do that is crucial. You need that. And then having that property manager that you can kind of vet. And you may not have them now, but I think even just speaking to that, and you may be able to speak to that, is if you see they're not doing what needs to be done, hire slow, fire fast, right? Because I know when I had properties in the Baton Rouge area, Louisiana, I was out of sight, out of mind, in the sense of just, few properties that I had out there, and I had to get rid of the property management company. They were driving it to a hole. And the moment I made that switch, complete transition, right? So having the right boots on the ground. So I don't know if there was reasons why you switched, switched who was managing it, or decided to have someone else manage it. If you want to talk to that at all, you can.
Yeah, of course. So the main problem I had with the property manager was a few things. So one of the first things was they sent these reports or whatever, monthly expenses, whatever the case is, right? And they revised the report and eventually started showing requests that the tenants made. So one of the requests that I saw was that the fence collapsed, like it's like a wood picket, whatever. It fell. And so I'm like, well, why didn't anybody tell me about this? And they dragged their feet to get it fixed, that portion of the fence to get it fixed. And I had my boots on the ground, go out there and look. You sent me a picture and I'm like, wow. So clearly they're not worried about what's happening at this property, because they are not proactive about telling me what's going on. So that was one of the red flags. And that particular problem followed me to this day. That was like over 4 years ago. And this summer I just replaced, it's a corner lot. So this particular property, the fence was like on the long way, if that makes sense. And so I just replaced the whole wood picket, couple $1,000. Guy did a great job, whatever.
Yeah.
And so that was one. And then two, I had visited Dayton prior to buying anything. And then upon buying this particular property, I decided to go out there and visit maybe 2-3 months later. And so when I did that, I was trying to get access to the property, and the property manager was acting like I was a nuisance. And I'm like, dang, I'm just trying to. So I ended up going with my boots on the ground to the house just to check in, see how things are going, whatever the case is. It was like an in and out visit, but it's like, all right. And a friend of mine had been encouraging me to like just try to do the self-managing thing. And I've been doing that since, I think, since the beginning of 2021. And it's been fun. I'm decent, like whatever. It's not so bad. Yeah. But I would say most people should just get a competent property manager.
Yeah. And do their due diligence on it, right? Like making sure that they are interviewing. I would say even when I was investigating, I was looking into Birmingham and Huntsville, Alabama. And so what I did is found a property management company out there, once again, that knows the market like I know my market, right? Went out, I visited the area, we rode around, they kind of showed me their operations. It's good to get a feel for, what your property manager is, what's their inventory, what do they manage, what areas do they manage in, right? Like yours might be a property in a neighborhood that they're not used to that particular demographic or that clientele. And so really just seeing how they operate. Sometimes you just don't know, right? Like they could have came referred and they end up being hard. But back to the, once you start seeing those signs, it's usually a telltale. And it's indicating like, it might be time to go. And so, and in fact, I'm in the process of firing a property management company. And so, you just gotta know when to pull the plug, because it'll be a slow burn if you keep them on longer than than you need to. Yeah. So good for you for having the person that's in state and just able to help you navigate the waters too. So that's definitely good.
I appreciate that.
Now, let's talk BRED. And so for people who don't know what BRED is, Black Real Estate Dialogue, what led you? I don't know how many properties you picked up since kind of saying, hey, you know what? This is something I should be helping other people with. What kind of led you down? And tell people what Black Real Estate Dialogue is, kind of your purpose behind it, and then kind of why you created that. Why'd you create that space?
Absolutely, absolutely. So to answer your second question, I picked up another property the beginning of last year, and I intend to buy more and continue to stack my chips over the long term.
Cool. And
But
is it the same market?
same market,
Yeah, good.
different
Good, good.
neighborhood.
Yeah.
Actually, just placed somebody in there. They moved in September. It was vacant for a couple months. Had somebody for a year. They moved out, but it's like up and running now, thankfully. So that headache is over.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah, but yeah, always looking and planning to buy more. As far as Black Real Estate Dialogue, so around the time I got interested in investing in real estate, I was listening to a lot of podcasts and different things, and I realized that a very small number of people on all these great platforms were Black. And I'm like, well, there's got to be Black people doing these things. So that was really the start of it. And funny enough, it started the same week that I closed on my first property. It wasn't really intentional, but that's just how it went. So back in 2019. So the goal really was to share like my journey, share my story, and then also share the stories of other Black people in the space doing great things. And, it's grown into like more. So, now I cover a lot of real estate news, updates, tips, and things like that. I do interviews less frequently. I got some other projects I'm working on in the background that I think will be much bigger and better. And so, it's the content has shifted a bit, and it's still a lot of fun. It's been a great time. Yeah. YouTube has been great. It's been the main focus this year, really. And so that's been a great opportunity, but really to tell the stories and give information from our perspective for the benefit of everyone. The awesome thing is I have listeners from all and viewers from all cultures, which is great, because the information can be used by anybody. So what a joy it is to give that information that can help everyone from our perspective. So people know that there are different kinds of people doing good work in this space.
Absolutely. And just sharing it. I mean, like you said, sometimes it's the untold story. And I think underrepresented people in these spaces need to see and have vision that, okay, there are people like me out here doing this. And so I think it's very similar, kind of just, we talked a little bit earlier about syndication and some of the stuff I'm doing. Is exposing people like, yes, we do take down apartment buildings. This is possible for you, right? And so just opening up that space and opening up that door and that window into how it's possible, right? And giving people that vision. So kudos to you for that, and all the best on as you continue to kind of roll out new things. And I would say that's the beauty of not only real estate, but just having the faith to take the journey, is that you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes that keeps people on the fence, or that keeps people back. But you also don't know what you don't know. So if you took the step and said, hey, well, let's just try. As you continue to walk down the pathway to your financial freedom, to your generational wealth, you discover other doorways, right? If you stay on the fence, you don't walk down the hall. You don't even see the bedroom doors from the fence, right? You didn't even walk into the home. You didn't walk through the house. You have to take the step of faith to walk down this pathway, because there's doors you will never, ever open because you never took the first step of faith, right? And I think that's beautiful, just to see kind of like, hey, man, as I started doing this thing, you started this real estate dialogue not being an expert. That's usually, that is definitely one thing that keeps people, I'm not the expert, I don't know enough. But you said, I don't know enough, but gosh darn it, I'm researching it. And as I roll, I'm going to share it with people. And the fact that you've been doing that, and you've been able to amass, the group that you have, that you're educating, it's opened up other doorways for you. I would say it opened up other doorways, has it not?
It absolutely has.
Relationships that you did not previously have, you now have, right? Access to certain things that you once previously didn't have, now you have. And so, I love to see when people are doing stuff in that space and they're willing to take a shot and take a bet on themselves, even if they stumble, even if they didn't make it. So much more now that you've taken the step than you did just, I'm gonna play it safe. We don't win anything playing it safe. Actually, if we're in comfortable positions, I believe we're going backwards. So I love that. I love that. Keep doing what you're doing.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
No worries.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, in agreement to everything you said.
Yeah, no. That's cool. So we never end the show without, this is Lessons into Blessings. We never end the show without talking about one major lesson you've learned, or maybe one hurdle you've had to overcome that you were able to take, learn from it, and turn it into a blessing. And we try to stick on this pathway of real estate, but sometimes there's life lessons that roll into blessings for real estate. So if you could find one lesson, one hurdle you've had to overcome that you were able to now turn into a blessing, it continues to bless you now today.
Yes. So the first lesson I can think of is when I took over the self-management of my first property, it was fine. And it was fine until the tenant let me know that she wanted to end her lease a little bit early. And so I let her do that. I didn't have any penalty for her or anything like that. I was like, fine, whatever. But when my boots on the ground went into the property just to assess what it was like, they had cleaned it and everything, but we noticed that there was a stench and odor in the carpet.
Oh no.
And unfortunately, she was letting the dogs do their business in there. And so, that was a headache because there was carpet in the majority of the house.
Yeah.
And I wasn't in a position to be able to go out there. This was about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And so what I was talking to a friend of mine, he's like, look, what I suggest to you is you rip the carpet up and then you just put luxury vinyl plank flooring, get somebody who you will pay for the labor, but they'll do, and you'll get the materials. Mm-hmm. And so I had somebody go out there and measure and all this stuff. And the problem was I did not do a good job of keeping tabs on her and really utilizing my boots on the ground to make sure stuff was getting done in a timely manner.
Yeah.
And eventually she did get everything done. She got the floors throughout the house and it was cool, but there was a lot of problems. Like she was also painting as well, but the paint wasn't all done properly. My boots on the ground went out there. She sent me pictures and things like that. And she was like, oh, by the way, the lights were on all night. There were cigarettes. So it's just, I didn't do a good job of keeping tabs on this individual who was doing all this stuff.
All the contract.
Correct.
Work. Yeah.
Correct. So that was the mistake that I made. And from then on, I believe that I've gotten better in that area and leveraging Courtney to just check on things as needed.
Yeah.
And so that was a lesson that I learned, and it was so stressful because I was spending, like, the reserves ran out, like the money I saved from rental income and all that stuff eventually ran out. So now I'm going into my own pocket to pay for stuff and get things done. So it was miserable. But, now that I look at the turnover that I did this year, it wasn't as bad, right? It wasn't as bad.
Yeah.
The house was left in pretty solid condition. So there wasn't like a tremendous amount of things I needed to do. I needed to get a good amount of stuff done, but it was nowhere near what that experience was like. And it was much smoother, which I'm happy about. But the good thing is you just keep learning, right? Like, trust me, there's times during that first experience, I just wanted to give up. Like, am I supposed to be doing this? Should I just get a property manager? But I'm happy I went through that experience because it taught me a lot. And interestingly, many people experienced this, but what also happened in 2021 was, like, for whatever reason, the rents shot up. So my rents went up like 40-50%, which is great because had it not taken me as long, I probably would have rented it for less money, right? Because by the time I was ready to turn around and rent it, which was probably like 3 months later, the rent comps were through the roof. And I've had the same family in there going on 4 years. So everything worked out in the end. But, it's a story I tell because it's important to be transparent about the journey because everything doesn't always go as planned. Like sometimes there are very trying and inconvenient times on the journey.
Yep, absolutely. And you can't always see that. I went through a similar experience as well. One thing I will say that taught me time and materials, itemize everything. When you get invoices or you get kind of a bid, I want to itemize every part of that invoice or that bid, so that I know kind of time and materials for what they're going to do, if they're going to do floors, if they're going to paint, so that if any time I need to kind of pull the plug on them, I can just pay them for what they've done and pull the plug on the rest, right? And then also having a timeline. So, you know, on those bids, okay, hey, this work is supposed to get done by X, Y, and Z date. So you have kind of, you know, somewhat of an outline of not only just time-wise, but also cost-wise, how things are going to get broken out. Because yeah, contractors are special.
I don't like working with them at all.
Yeah.
To the least,
you gotta
keep
really
it
have good people and have deep, because you never know when's, you know, I've had contractors that have been good on one project and then, you know, oh man, they're crappy on this one, right? And so having a slightly, you know, some backups to be able to do some of that work is definitely important. So I understand the pain of that, but yes, just like you said, you never know what that's going to turn into. I've had those pains as well, and then you're like, you know what? But it's not it's big in the moment, but when you get past it, you're like, you know, it's still worth it at the end of the day. So,
yep.
Good stuff. Well, can you tell people how to just get connected to Black Real Estate Dialogue, how to get connected with you?
Yeah, so the best way is really anywhere. So any social media platforms. I'm most active on YouTube and Instagram. So I would say you can find me there at Black Real Estate Dialogue, and anywhere you listen to podcasts and stuff, you can find me there as well, Black Real Estate Dialogue. So just type that anywhere and you can find me and reach out.
Cool. Well, until next time, guys, stay blessed.
Thank you.